Welcome to this 3PDK webinar with Jacqueline Hollows, and thank you so much, Jacqueline, for accepting the invite. Before we begin, I just want to say a few words about the organization 3PDK. This webinar is hosted by 3PDK, which is a nonprofit organization based in Denmark. Our purpose is to spread the understanding of the three principles. This understanding is a spiritual understanding, and it's spreading all over the world. The understanding of the three principles has helped people overcome stress, anxiety, addiction, depression, and help people find back to clarity, peace, and mental health again and again. You can learn more about 3PDK on our website, 3pdk.org, and in the Facebook group 3PDK, De Tre Principper Danmark. So, welcome to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you very much. It's so lovely to be here.
And for those of you who don't know Jacqueline, she also goes by the name Mama J and JB Hollows. She's a Three Principles practitioner who delivers services to organizations in prisons, to entrepreneurs, and all kinds of people interested in finding mental well-being and exploring their full potential.
That's right.
And a writer not to forget. She just published her book, Wing of an Angel. Yeah.
Which is available from your man.
Yeah, Casper. Type
Yes.
Boutique has it, yeah.
So you want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Very nice to see you. I was in Copenhagen earlier this year, so I'm still feeling the love from the community, and really delighted that you would invite me here to talk. So I'll talk for a bit and maybe tell a few stories about how I got started and why I do the work that I do. But if you have questions or you have some thoughts that occur to you that you'd like to share, I love to hear them. So I love this to be a conversation if possible. And I'm very happy to go in any direction that you want me to go in. Is that all right with you? Nice. Thank you to Daughter for hosting and to 3PDK for inviting me. And if you want to ask a question in Danish, Daughter is going to help you to translate. So, if I start with a little bit of my background and how I got into working in prisons, maybe that will just set the scene for anybody who doesn't know who I am. So I, for many years, was working in information technology and customer services, and all my degrees and all my experiences in that field. So nothing to do with mental health and nothing to do with prison. And a number of circumstances happened to me or for me, I feel like it was now, and they weren't necessarily good. So I was made redundant. My estranged father got in touch and was dying of cancer. I was flat broke. I had no money. I lost everything. So a load of stuff all happened. And because of that, I realized it gave me a chance to think about my life and what I was doing. And it felt rather pointless, there was no purpose. I loved my title. I had a big long title, and I loved the salary, and I loved my flash car, but none of it, I didn't love the job, and I didn't love what I was doing. I felt quite lost, and I felt like an imposter for a long time. I'd also struggled with my own demons. I had dependency on alcohol. I tried to find things to make me feel better. I drank, I had relationships, I used food. So anything to make me feel better, because I always felt like I wasn't good enough. And the story of that is in the book. So you can read the background of that. But this upheaval in my life gave me this opportunity to reflect on where I was and what I really wanted. And all I knew is I didn't want what I had, and that there must be some other way. So I started to, you think it would be retraining, but really I was just playing. And I did a number of different things like neuro-linguistic programming, counseling, emotional freedom technique, tapping. And I just played in those areas thinking, and I was surprised by all these different things that could help people. And some of those things helped me a little bit, and some of them didn't. But they would help in a certain area. And I would feel like, yeah, okay, now I can manage my fear of public speaking, but I still drink too much if I feel anxious about going into a room. And I accidentally fell across the innate health paradigm, the Three Principles paradigm. And I thought it was a bit woo-woo, a bit spooky, And I thought it was a bit like, nah, that's a cult. That's not for me. So, but I was retraining. I was training with Michael Neal, as it happens. And there were other things. He wasn't doing Three Principles totally at that time. But along the journey, I was also doing some business networking. So going to breakfasts and lunch and meeting other entrepreneurs, and, you try and sell your services. And I went to one of these and I met this fella, this man who was in recovery from heroin addiction. And he was the most unusual person I'd ever met and inspiring. I thought he was amazing. And so I volunteered to work at his social enterprise, his nonprofit organization. And he was making film and teaching people how to use film and scripts and audio. Vulnerable people who were in addiction, people who have been in prison. And I just helped him. I just thought he was amazing and helped him. And I didn't help him with the Three Principles. I just helped him with writing grants. And eventually he asked me to be his support person in the university, because he was going to university after having no education. And he was struggling. He had a couple of disabilities and he was struggling. And he could pay for a support person. Now, just bearing in mind the title of this webinar is to ignore your invisible thinking and not to take notice of your invisible thinking. I'm getting to the point. So he kept inviting me to do this job with him, which I did not want to do. It was going and writing his notes at university and studying. And I have done that, but I don't enjoy it. And I kept saying no. And the reason why I was saying no is because I kept saying, I'm a coach. I don't need to do that. I'm a coach. And he was offering me £25 an hour. And I was saying, well, I can charge £75 an hour as a coach. Like, why would I take that job? Anyway, I had 2 clients. So on a good month. And I was flat broke. I was literally flat broke. I couldn't pay my mortgage. I couldn't drive my car. My flash car was on the drive. I had to walk everywhere. And I kept saying, no, I don't want to do that. And eventually he said, well, if you don't want to do it, I need to go to an agency and outsource it. And I said, oh, okay, well, how many hours will it be? And he said about 20 hours. And it was a no-brainer, right? It was 20 hours at £25 an hour. I was going to make a fortune. So considering that I needed to pay my bills, so I agreed to do it. And when I work with people, I ask them to consider what's occurring to you constantly that you're ignoring. What is life showing you that you keep looking away from? Because that's what was happening with me. Life was saying, here's an opportunity to help you. Here's an opportunity to help you. Here's an opportunity to help. I was going, no, that's not me. I'm a coach. And eventually I said yes. And not only was it really helpful because I earned some money and could pay my bills, but also because this chap used to do home detoxes. So he would take people into his home who were recovering from addictions, and the local nurse would come in and do the medical side, and then he would take care of them until they got over their initial recovery days. So, you know, they would have DTs and hallucinations and be tempted and so on, and he'd take care of them. And I was always at his house because I was helping him with his university studies. And so I would talk to these people in the kitchen, and I would talk to them about the inside out nature of life. I would, you know, even accidentally, because I wasn't trying to be a coach to them, I was just like talking about what I'd heard about. And I could see that they were amazing. I absolutely loved them, and that they were creative and resilient and determined and persistent. And I could see that they didn't think so. So they would talk about all their issues and why life was difficult and how there was stigma. And I would be seeing like how clever they were and how amazing that they did this thing. Because if you know people with addictions, they will go to the end of the earth to get their drug of choice, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is. They will go to the end of the earth. And I was showing them, like, isn't that amazing that you don't let anything stop you? Isn't that interesting? Eventually, with working with these people, I like to say that they taught me about the three principles because I could see it alive in them. And eventually I thought, well, if they're all amazing, then maybe I'm amazing too. And I started to think that maybe that's true for everybody, because why would it just be them, right? And that really surprised me. It really surprised me. Anyway, fast forward, it was through that connection that I ended up being introduced to someone who worked in prison. And I will get onto the prison stories, but can you see how I had no idea of the path that I was taking? I couldn't, it wasn't even in my imagination. To work in prison was not on my radar one bit. I was a coach, right? I was going to go and fly to Hawaii and wear little jeweled sandals on the beach and, you know, work with rich people. It wasn't in my consciousness that I was going to end up working in a smelly prison where, you know, it's all bangs and noise and everything else. But life was showing me something to do, because life knew. Life always knows. Life knows you need to make money. Life knows you need to learn something. Life knows everything already. And all we have to do is follow those nudges. And it doesn't look linear. It looks like whatever life puts there, that's the thing. That's the opportunity. And so I got there through a very squiggly way, wasn't linear. And people often ask me, how did you work in prison? Well, accidentally, basically. Is this okay? Yeah, good. Carry on. Okay. So through this circuitous, which I can't say, route, I ended up going and meeting someone who ran the substance misuse service, so the service for addictions in prison. And on my first day of that meeting, I was absolutely petrified. And he came and met us at the gate where you have to wait and get checked in. And then he walked us through the prison grounds. Not very far, as I now know, but it seemed like it took miles, it seemed like ages. And I remember thinking, oh, what do I say if somebody says hello? Oh, what about if they speak to me? Am I allowed to speak to them? I had so much fear and invisible thought about the very people I was going in to offer to work with. And that was all from watching TV and what I got from the media, and all from, just invisible thinking, basically. And I also remember a time when I did start working in the prison, when I was left, the first time I was left on my own, and I'd been trained, so I had keys and I could get around the prison on my own. And I got left on my own, and the place that I was left was about a 5-minute walk to the exit, to the gate. And I ran. And you have to go through two great big gates, and you have to lock them behind you. And so it takes a long time. And so I ran, and as I was unlocking the gate, panicking to get through, what am I actually running from? There weren't even any people. I was just running. And you might think that I'd be ashamed to tell that story, but I like to tell it because it wasn't that I was brave or an angel or amazing because I went to help people. I was literally just following what life was putting in front of me, even though I was scared, or I had thoughts, or I wasn't really sure what I was doing. And what I found is that you get what you need. So I was scared and I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned. I saw that. And on my very first day working in prison, we had about 3 months of training. And when they train you, there's a mindset in the prison service in the UK anyway. So it's all about punishment. It's all about containment. It's about, the idea is that we protect the public. And so therefore we keep everybody as contained as possible, and we view them with suspicion. We view them as criminals, not as human beings. And so when they train you, they tell you all about how people can make a knife out of a pencil, how people can create nooses to harm themselves, how they will take you hostage and lock you behind the door, and what you're supposed to do if that happens, how they'll try and manipulate you. So if somebody asks you, which they did, to send this card to their grandma, you mustn't do that, because they're trying to manipulate you. And there's a word for it that I've forgotten, but basically train you to see if they can eventually get you to bring in drugs or phones, or do naughty things. And the training is full of all of these potential issues that you might face. So by the time you actually start working in prison and you've got your keys on your belt, great big bunch of keys, and your radio, like a comms radio, and various other bits and bobs, you're petrified. It's supposed to make you feel like, I know what to do, I know what I need to do. But you're actually petrified. Well, I was anyway. And prison is stark. It's usually in old buildings, Victorian buildings. It's either boiling hot or freezing cold. Uh, chipped walls. They're not very well maintained. It smells, like cabbage and toast and sweaty shoes that are left outside the cells. And there's a lot of men. It was a male prison, and there was around about 120 people on the wing that I worked in, which is the unit. So on my first day, I'm there with my Smart Beyond Recovery t-shirt on, and all my clipboard and all my books. I had loads and loads of books because I had them for 3 hours, and I thought, how am I going to entertain these people for 3 hours? Because the process of taking people back to their cells was so horrendous. I'd rather just keep them. And so I'm standing there with my clipboard and my whiteboard in the room all set up. And they, at that time, they had been locked up for 23 hours, which was at that time unusual. It's not so unusual now. And they were agitated, so they were banging the cell doors with their plastic cups and shouting, and there was somebody having some sort of episode, and he was shouting, and there was music somewhere, and so it was complete overwhelm. And I thought, it's just like the TV, it's just like really scary. And then they all get let out, and then they're jumping around and they're excited, and they're jumping over the half naked, and getting toast. And then they see you, and there you are, a girl, and they don't get that many opportunities. So it doesn't really matter what you look like. They're like, oh, there's a girl. So off they run to me. Hello, miss, what are you doing here? And they're all curious. And I was standing with my clipboard, and my colleague was outside to wait for the men that had to come in. And this big man came to me, and to me, he looked like a prisoner. He was a big man with a shaved head and a tat on his neck, and a bit scary, like really tall. And he said, "Can I come in, miss?" And the rule is that you have to look at your list, and if the name isn't on the list, you mustn't let them in, because everybody tries it on. And so I asked his name, and then I looked at my list, and his name wasn't on the list. So the rule is I have to say no. Anyway, he's glowering at me, and I said, well, and he said, "I just want to see the chicks." And the chicks is slang in the UK for females, for women. So I thought, oh, he wants to look out the window, because all the officers line up to make sure people don't escape. So they line up outside the window. And I thought, well, I don't know what to do. So I looked at my list. I looked at my list again, and it still wasn't on it. So I said, okay, because I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to say, no, you're not allowed. Just take a sip. So he came in, and he moved my flip chart out of the way of the window, and he looked at the window, and on the window ledge was a nest, a dove nest, and some doves had been put their eggs in the nest, and the chick is a baby bird. So he didn't want to look at the women. He wanted to look at he wanted to see if the eggs had hatched. And when I saw that, and let me just tell you, the nest was a proper prison nest. It was so skanky and thin and dirty. It's like even the pigeons, you know. But all you could see is barbed wire and this little nest on the window ledge where the dove had laid its eggs. And he said to me that he wanted to see if the chicks had hatched because he was getting out of prison next week, and he wanted to see if they'd hatched before he left because he's been watching out for them. In that moment, I saw the humanity of the people that I was going to work with. I didn't see them as criminals. I saw them as people. I saw that he might be big with tats and, you know, a bit scary voice and everything. And he's done crime because he's in prison, right? But he still wanted to see the little chicks to see if they'd been born. He'd been going in every time that he could to check on them. And he saved the day. He saved the program. Because without him, I didn't realize how much invisible thinking I had about being scared, about what they could do to me, you know, all of that. I wasn't thinking about that consciously, but somewhere in my mind was a whole load of judgment and prejudice that he took away by showing me his humanity. And I don't actually even know his name, but I wouldn't be sat here today without those two people, without the guy with the addiction who forced me to do the job, and without him who showed me the humanity of people in prison. And I still feel very grateful for that and blessed to have met him. And it helps me to see that you really don't know who you're talking to. You could be talking to the angel that brings you some blessing. You could be talking to somebody that you need to learn from. Because that's what he showed me as well, is that I wasn't there to teach anything. I was there to learn. I'll pause in case you have any questions or comments you want to make, and then I can carry on. Is this helpful to you? Okay. Oh, thank you. You want me to carry on talking about prison or something else? Okay. Prison. So I guess some of you might be practitioners. So I'll talk a little bit about the why, the what I did, you know, like what did I do in prison? How did I teach this understanding to people in prison? And I'll preface it by saying, when I said I really didn't know what I was doing, I really didn't know what I was doing. I just felt called is a bit of a strong word. I just saw that that's what I needed to do. It was a no-brainer. But when it came down to actually, because I had to write a proposal, when it came down to writing the proposal of the business case for this, and I had to think about what will I do if I thought it was going to be a 12-week course, which I'll come back to, and for 3 hours for 12 weeks. So I had to think about what am I going to do for all of that time, because funnily enough, the prison didn't let me say, oh, I'll see how it goes. No, they wanted a curriculum, you know, they wanted to know, like, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to go in and do good. And the psychologists in particular were concerned. They were very concerned because they were always concerned that you'll bring something in that will harm people more than help them. So I had to outline my whole course, even though I had no clue. So if I was starting now, I might start from a different place, but where I started from was just what I knew at the time. I'd read some books by Jack Pransky, who I know is coming to see you soon. I'd read some books by him. He had a big old curriculum from back in the day, which is quite out of date now, but he had a big old curriculum which I got a hold of. And there was Joe Bailey, the Serenity Principle. So I'd read all these books, and this was 2015 or 2014 when I was writing the proposal. So there wasn't a plethora of free PGC didn't even exist. Free PDK didn't exist. You know, there was no organization, there was no research, there was nothing really. Some tapes of Sid's, his books and his tapes, and some of the original teachers, but really not a lot. So I found the practical things. So in some of the books that I mentioned, there were like some drawings and some exercises and stuff like that. So I just filled a curriculum with things that I could use to show people that life is an inside out job. And that was my sort of my desire was to do that. What I really was doing, what I realized, you know, a couple of years later when I spoke with Jan Chipman and Elsie Spittle and those people, old teachers of SIDS, what I really was doing was going in and meeting them soul to soul. What I was really doing was going in and listening and seeing people for who they really were. And the stuff that I did was just stuff. And so what I see by that is that you just do the stuff, like you turn up to a webinar and you tell the stories that come to mind. But really what's happening is we're connecting at a soul level, right? You're being impacted from within yourself, because within you, as you listen to me, you'll feel inspiration or joy or peace, and that's being created by you and from you. And I'm just a catalyst in this moment. And I realized later on that that's actually what I was doing, and the rest of it was just filling in the gaps, if you like. But what I learned early on is what worked and what didn't. And by worked, I meant I was always on the lookout for when people were getting noisy and when they were getting quiet. And my leaning was towards quiet, because I know that in a quieter mind, people can hear their own wisdom, their own intuition. And it's still there in the noisy mind. It's still accessible, but we're not so tuned into it. So my intention was always to see what makes them noisy and what makes them quiet. And quite often in those early days, and I would still even do this now, if the room got rowdy, which it did, and they got into like little debates with each other and arguing with me, I knew there was something to do with me. There was something to do with what I was doing that created that. And more often than not, it was that I was trying to teach something from my head and not from my heart. That maybe I'd seen somebody, you know, one of Sid's students do a diagram, and I was trying to copy the diagram and teach what I thought was a good idea. And I saw that over and over again with all the facilitators that I trained as well, is that when we teach our ideas, it really doesn't go very far. People don't feel that. But when you teach from your heart, or you teach from the quiet space, or you let life channel through you, people hear that, and they're not hearing what you're saying, they're hearing the connection to mind, their connection to mind. They're recognizing themselves as part of nature and part of this amazing consciousness of life. Of course, they're not going to say that. That's not what they're thinking about, but that's what's happening. I didn't know that. But I knew that quiet was a more fertile ground for insight, and that everybody is pure. Everybody is born with the ability to hear their own wisdom. And knowing those two things just helped me. So I did loads of mistakes, loads of times the room would get rowdy and they'd be shouting and throwing things at each other. Loads of times when they'd say, well, what have you got then, miss? What are you going to teach us today? And they'd be all like, you know, with me. Loads of times when I just wasn't sure what to do next. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because even if you can pause one little bit, you get what you need next, even in that chaos. Whereas I worked in the sex offenders jail next door as well. We ended up getting into there, and I worked with there, and they were a whole different bunch. They were very quiet. There was no rowdiness and throwing papers there. They would sit. We'd work with 15 men in one go, and we'd be in a little porter cabin in the middle of some gardens. And because they were there for a long time, so they made the prison, actually it was a nice prison. There were gardens and beehives, and you could hear the birds singing. Some residents were allowed to have budgies as pets. Anyway, so they would come into this porter cabin, this hot little porter cabin, and they would just stare at you blank faced and not engage at all. And the reason being is because they're used to being analysed. So they're used to people looking at their behaviour, and even if they're quiet, like making some judgment about that. And they're used to, one of the programs that they had to do was to repeat their crime and the details of their crime over and over again. And the idea of that program was that they would break them and then they would fix them. I mean, just shocking, barbaric. It's actually been banned, but that was going on while I was there. So you can imagine that they were very hostile, they were very suspicious, and they thought we were completely bonkers. Like, you know, I was there with a colleague called Paul, and they honestly thought we were bonkers. And we would sit and talk like this, and there would be silence, and then we would ask them questions and they wouldn't answer any questions. And it got to the break. We had this group for 3 days, and it got to the break and there was nothing coming back at all. And Paul said, let's have a break. And he said, I've got nothing. And I said, I've got nothing. Don't look at me. I've got absolutely nothing. And he said, oh, what are we going to do then? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, let's just sit in silence for a while. And we sat in silence together. And all I kept thinking was, I hope he comes up with something. which was getting in my way. But, you know, it's just innocent, isn't it? And then he said, I know, let's ask them. And so we finished the break and he said, right, we're going to be together for 3 days in this room all day. So we want to know, if you were designing this course, what would you put in it? What do you want to see in this? And there was some like frowns and grumbling and everything. And someone said, well, why should we do that? And Paul said, yeah, you're right. You're right. Why should you do that? But the alternative is we sit here in silence, because we're not just going to keep speaking to you if it's not helpful. We want to help you. We want to support you. And then someone said, well, I'd really like to know how I can stop thinking at night, because all night I can't sleep. And all night long, all I keep thinking is how guilty I am, what I've done, how bad I am, what a bad person I am. I'd like to know, like, can we have that? We said, oh yeah, we'll have that. And then everybody started sharing, well, I'd like to know this and I'd like to know that. And we designed the program on what they wanted in it. And we wrote all their things down. And we said, great, that's what we're going to do then. And we did, and it was amazing, of course, because now they'd all opened up and they'd shared. And one person said something and another one would go, me too, I feel like that, wow, you feel like that. So that we just got this conversation, and it was the best program I've ever run. It was so good, apart from the ones that I run with Dorsa, of course. It was so good. And the thing about inspired action, about intuition, about mind, is that you don't then take that and go, oh, this is a strategy. This is what we're going to do next time. If it occurs to you and if it feels like that's fresh again, but because it was fresh, that's why it had meaning. It came to Paul into his mind from nowhere, and it was meaningful in the room. And I think maybe we did it one other time, but we didn't employ that as a strategy. What we did employ as a strategy was not knowing, being okay with not knowing, and staying in the not knowing until you know, and trusting that whatever comes in that not knowing is right, even if it sounds bonkers. Does that make sense? No, thank you, Simon. Does anyone resonate with this? Have you got a similar experience or something that you can share? Thanks, Dennis. All right then. Oh, go on, Marie Louise.
Hi, I didn't know how to raise my imaginary, so it was like this. I was just ironing my clothes, listening, and so I said, "Oh my God, I saw something." It was just the last thing that you said about showing up without knowing is I'm a teacher, and normally I teach what we in Denmark call the 10th grade, where a lot of these young people, they don't feel so good. They're not in a nice place in their life, or at least that's what they, that's what they feel. And I've noticed that after I met the three principle, it's all about showing up without knowing. It's certainly, I see that is what it's all about. It's about me being present, not having some kind of plan or some kind of idea that I need to fix them or do this or do it like this. And it's just, it has been a huge relief. Because one thing is teaching them that, of course, I need to be prepared in my my knowledge in my subject. Of course, I know that that's part of the job. But in the relation, which is maybe 80% of my work, really, I notice that the more I show up without knowing what's going to happen, the more present I am and the better they react to me. Or the more they feel heard and seen. So often I've spent many years as a teacher going into, like, for example, if a child is suffering in some kind, we go into this room and there is the student or the child, and there is the parents or the psychologist or from the hospital or something like that. And all these people in this room, all they want to do is fix this child or young person that they are convinced there is something wrong. And I just see it in complete reverse. And sometimes I can't understand. I've been doing that same thing for so many years, for 16, 17 years as a teacher, going into the room by my heart, with my heart in it, thinking, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fix this broken little bird. And they are absolutely eagles, all of them. And it's an amazing shift in my way of being a teacher or with these young people.
Amazing. Beautiful. And what's the response like? What are you seeing? A change in the response?
I am seeing a huge change, and it's immediate. I mean, it doesn't, of course, the change in the young person, or it happens gradually, but the relation, the feeling in the room is immediately changed.
Yeah.
And oh, well, that was wow, what happened here? Just by me having a different perspective, the whole perspective changes.
Yeah.
And often I also see now that, for example, if a child is suffering and they are, and I have conversation or meetings with parents, for example, they're frustrated, they're angry, and I see that they're just really afraid, the insecure. And when I'm putting words into this and saying, it's okay, I can see that you're afraid, and it's okay. Let's talk about, where does that come from? What are you thinking? And it completely changes.
Wow.
And this is why I hope so much that this will come to the Danish schools. And it is slowly, because more and more teachers I meet within this understanding, they are teachers or pedagogues or the PPR, our psychological division or something. And it's just the change is humongous. It's amazing. And certainly I go from feeling, I was feeling I'm so tired. I was tired of being the one caring. I felt stressed and burned out, and I was giving and giving and giving every day. And then I go home and I was giving and giving and giving to my children and husband and stuff like this. I feel really burned out.
Mm-hmm.
I have reinvented my job. I mean, I have a new job. It's completely amazing. My job is completely new. Mm-hmm. I am not tired. I'm not burned out. And if I feel that I'm beginning to feel like, oh, that's you need to relax a little bit here. It's really amazing that I find myself in a completely new job. My mission has changed for the teacher, if you can say, as a teacher. I think my mission has changed. It's amazing.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Amazing. Oh, so we have another question, and I don't know how to say that lady's name or man's name. Helly. Can you talk about look for the helpers? I heard you talk about it in Copenhagen. Nice, thank you. Okay, so this came about from, I interviewed some of the guys on how do you live in prison, like how do you cope in prison, what are the things that one would need to know. And one of the things that came up was look for the helpers. And interestingly, I've heard this saying before as well. Apparently, when somebody has an accident and they are, you know, they've had a car crash or something and they're on the ground, the paramedics will sometimes say, look for the helpers. Because there are always helpers and they come in different forms. So in the prison, what they would see is mostly there's lots of negative talk, you know, officers that aren't helping, or the system, or they're being set up to fail, the food, like there's a lot to complain about. And actually, quite rightly, there's a lot that needs fixing. But the people who do well are the people who look for the helpers, because they spot the people, the officer that's friendly, or will actually listen, or will go an extra mile, or will ask you, you know, what's wrong with you today, because you're misbehaving, and not just assume that you're misbehaving because you're bad. Those people will often find ways of giving you a leg up, supporting you, introducing you to somebody, making a suggestion of something that could help you, giving you some extra library time so that you can study something. And it really struck me as something that we don't do in life either. We don't look for the helpers. We look for what's wrong. We don't look for, we're always surprised, right? When somebody goes that extra mile with customer service, I always think, wow, there's a services that I'm speaking to at the moment. And the first time Vistaprint, they print business cards and stuff. And I made an order, and then then I needed to make another order, and I would have had to not pay the delivery if I'd have made this other order. And it wasn't massive. It was like a £5 or something. But I thought, I don't want to pay the delivery if I don't have to. And I phoned Vistaprint, and I totally expected to be fobbed off and to not, you know, not make any sense at all, especially when it was an Indian accent. So I realized they outsourced their customer service. So I thought, oh, this is it. There's almost no point in doing this, you know. But I did, and the person was so helpful, and she was like, "Yeah, okay, I see what you've done there. No worries, I'll refund your money, and actually, what you need to do is cancel that and put it together. And just in case, I'm going to put an extra delivery gift on your account. So in case it goes wrong, so you've got that covers you." And she was just like massively helpful. And I realized I'd gone in with that judgment and that prejudice, but actually she was one of the helpers. And I've actually had another good experience with Vistaprint. So I've decided they're all helpers at Vistaprint. But I see how helpful it is in my own life to be not thinking about why something's going to be difficult, and be having my eye out for the angels, the helpers, the people who want to support not just me but other people. And there's always someone who wants to make the world a better place, who wants to help you, who wants to encourage you. And growing up, I was someone who never asked for help. I was expected to do it, to get on with it, and considered stupid if I had to have help. So I got into a habit of not asking people for help and feeling embarrassed if I did have to end up asking someone for help. And what I've realized is people want to help. You help them by letting them help you, because people want to support other people. They want to feel useful. They want to be there for you. How many times when you're having a trouble, does somebody say, let me know if I can help you? And you like, what could they do? You know, could come do my ironing. That would help me. Mary Louise, she likes doing ironing. She can come and do my ironing for me. But you don't know how to ask. We don't know in our society anyway. We don't know how to ask for help. So I don't know if that was what you were looking for, Hele.
You know what, Jacqueline? I don't know if you have it handy, but I remember where that came up in your talk in Copenhagen. And it was, you had that paper handy with what the prisoners wanted to pass on the advice.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, if you have it handy, that might be nice, but I don't know if you have it.
I don't know if I do. I'll have a little look. I know it was. So I write for the prison newspaper, and this was one of the things that I put in the prison newspaper. So I can see. Meanwhile, you can think about other questions that you might have. It's not coming easily. For some reason. Oh, here we go. Hang on a sec. No, I'm afraid it's not. I don't even know what I called it.
We can share it another time. Don't look for it, Jacqueline.
I found it. I found it.
Yay.
Yeah, so this piece was talking about I'll tell you what the boys said. So basically they were saying that you can't expect the system to change. And one of the sayings that my husband has is that the system isn't broken. Oh, excuse me. The system isn't broken. It was built that way. So when we try and change a system, we're trying to change something that was already designed to work in a way that we don't want it to work. And so the idea is that you don't even try to do that. You actually go back to the beginning and you look at what you can do. And then you can be the change in the world that you see, that you want to see. So start looking for a change in you. And I asked them some questions. So one of them was, how do you spend your time to think? And one of the lads, Chris, he said that he realized that being in prison was quality time. That while he was there, he was safe. He wasn't subject to drugs. He wasn't having to get into trouble. He was basically he was fed. He was told when to get up. You don't have to make any decisions. You know, you're told when to get up. You're given your food at certain times every day, and that he could use that quality time out of the chaos and use that time to relax and reassess his life. So he'd often ask me for quiet time in the group where I would read to them. And another guy asked himself, how do any of us become who we become? And is it possible to live a different life? And all he knew was that he wanted to not hurt people. That's all he knew. But he didn't know. He's actually out now. He's a security guard for celebrities. And he'd been in and out of prison all his life. He'd been a drug dealer all his life and running guns. And he did not know any other life. But he'd come to a point where he realized, I don't want to hurt people, either himself or by his deeds. And that's all he knew. And so he would use his time to reflect, well, what might that look like then? And actually, when he first got out of prison, he's been out 2 years now. When he first got out, he did 4 jobs and he basically slept about 3 hours a day because he wanted to keep himself busy so that he didn't get tempted. And so he burned himself out by doing 4 jobs. But that's what made sense to him. And that, in a way, you could say that worked because that did keep him busy and it kept him out of trouble for nearly a year until he realized he couldn't keep that up. And then he did something different. And now he's working for this security firm and he's one of the highest revered people there because he really takes care of his charges, and he drives a really flash car which he enjoys. Then there was the look for the helpers, and it's I'd written here that the grim reality, the psychological strain, the bullying often leads to people hurting themselves and sometimes taking their own lives. But they noticed that there's those helpers, the people that listen, someone that showed them compassion. Those are the people that to look for when you're in that state of mind. Derek said that one of the things that made the difference to him was that we saw him. We didn't see his crime. We saw beneath his crime. We saw him. And that's what to do with your clients, is look beyond what their behaviors, look beyond what they're presenting. As Marie-Louise talked about, that's all coming from fear, or something is prompting them to act in that way and to display those symptoms. But if you look beyond that and you see the pureness, the truth of them, who they really are beneath that, that makes a difference. They talked about having a choice, which is really a really interesting thing because you don't get a lot of choices in prison, and they often talk about not noticing what choice is. But in actual fact, they said if you're still around, then you're choosing to live, because there is an option not to live. So if you're still here, you're choosing to live. So if you're choosing to live, then you might as well live your best life. Like, what does that look like? If you make that choice, I want to be the best. I want to choose my best life. So here is a few of their tips, which I'll just read out. Learn to work around the people that don't want you to do well and gravitate towards the people that do. If you think negatively, you'll have a negative experience. Live where you are, not where you think you should be. live well, sleep as well as you can, stay as healthy as you can, and keep away from the happy hatch, which is where they give you the drugs. And then walk your own line. Don't be a cons man and don't be a screws man. So don't try and fit in with the other criminals, and don't try and fit in with the officers. Walk your own line. And they're like 5 tips that you think they're very wise, right? They're very wise tips. And that's why I say, like, I went to learn from them. I would often sit in that room and feel like I just had a philosophy lesson, you know, from the stuff that they used to talk about. And I don't know if you read Sid Banks at all, but they loved Sid Banks. I used to, when I was first on this journey, I used to be a little bit shy about bringing out Sid. You know, what would people think of Sid, and was it a bit too woo woo and all of that? And about week 6, I would bring Sid in, and we'd watch Sid on the smallest old TV, like a big fat old TV from the old days, probably all too young to remember them, and on a balanced on a chair that wasn't even a flat chair, you know, so it's slightly tipping back with hardly any sound, and 15 men gathered round, you know, to hear every drop. And you could not hear a pin drop, or you could hear a pin drop. You could hear a pin drop. They latched on every single word. And the DVDs that I had were where Sid was in Hawaii, and he had the lei around his neck with the flowers. And a funny thing, I ran a Free Principles conference in the prison with the men were the speakers, and I had the visitors, the public came to see, and I was asking 2 of the boys who were leading it to create a brochure, you know, create a brochure for the conference, and they didn't do it. And a few weeks went by and they hadn't done it. And so I said to them one day, guys, you know, like, this is your conference. Like, what's going on here? Why, you know, I've given you access to stuff. Why won't you create a brochure? And they said, we've never been to we don't know what a conference is. We've never been to a conference. And I thought, yeah, wow, there's me again, you know, with my thinking. Everybody knows what a conference is. They'd never been to. They would. Well, how would they even do that? So obviously I apologized, and I brought in loads of brochures and I explained to them what a conference was. And the one lad said, oh, I'm so relieved. And I said, why? And he said, because I thought we had to all wear those leis that Sid wears around his neck. Because that's the only example of a conference that they knew was Sid with his thing around his neck on his chair. So that was another invisible judgments, invisible thinking, not realizing something that you know, I thought that everybody would know about. That was one of the best days of my life as well. And some of the people that came, Free Principles people came, but also just members of the public, people that I wanted to let know about the work or the charity organizations. And one of the people said that I learned more from this than I've learned from anything in my whole life. And one of the lads said, people get going up to them. We had 12 lads who were presenting. And one of the lads said that people kept coming up saying, that's amazing. What you just said there, that was amazing. That's changed my life. And he said, I thought the public hated me. And I can't believe that people are coming up and telling me that I changed their life. So it gave him hope and gave him inspiration to be the man that he could be.
Tors wrote in the chat if you can say a little more about the invisible thinking and how you point to it, for example, in your groups.
So if this was a group, this is what I would do. I would talk to people about, people don't know that they are the thinker, especially people who have followed that thinking. I don't just mean people in prison, people in general don't realize that they are the thinker. And what I mean by that is that we are having the thoughts. We are having the thoughts in our head. We are generating that. And I would talk to them about the river of thought. So I would talk to them about how thought flows through us like it does in a river. I'd draw it on the board. And how we have 80 to 120,000 thoughts a day that's been measured. And how we probably can't even remember the thoughts we had at lunchtime or the thoughts we had 10 minutes ago. And yet we become very engaged. We adopt some thoughts that we play over and over and over in our mind. And we don't realize that that's what we're doing. But when we look at that river of thought, we can also see it as an iceberg. So we're only ever seeing the tip of the iceberg. We're only ever seeing that much, this top bit here. We're not seeing all the thought underneath, everything down there. So something like 10% we're aware of. We're aware of where the door is in your room, what time of day it is, whether or not you're hungry, you know, what's the lighting like, what's the sound like, how long is the webinar, is it nearly over? We're aware of that. Are the kids screaming in the background? Is the dog barking? We're aware of some of that, but we're not aware of a load of other stuff that we've adopted, stuff that we beliefs, things that have shaped how we see the world. So we might look at a situation, and let's say a prison, let's say a sunset. I might assume that everybody loves sunsets, that they are some sort of miracle, that they make you feel calm, that they are beautiful. And that's my experience of sunsets. Some other people might not even care about sunsets. But I take my invisible thinking about sunsets with me wherever I go. And I project that onto the people that I'm with. So I might say, we'll all go and watch the sunset, thinking this is a really fun thing to do and a really amazing thing to do. And for some people, that might even be a painful thing to do. They might have some bad experience with sunsets. I carry my invisible thinking, my assumptions, and my beliefs with me. And we're always coming up against the limitations of our own thought. So, and that's natural. That's just human. That's just what we're doing. So if we don't know what a conference is, I had assumptions that everybody knows what a conference is because it's in my world, right? Like I wouldn't ever question that. But now I know, of course, not everybody has a understanding of what a conference is. I had some invisible thinking right there, had some assumptions that I was taking notice of. And it really came to light for me when I was watching one of the teachers coaching somebody, a live coaching session, and the teacher kept asking questions. And it seemed to be that they were asking questions about very simple things. And I realized that I make up the answer. So if someone says to me, I'm frightened, I make up what frightened means. I have an invisible understanding of fear. I have an experience of fear. But fear and being frightened to me is not the same as that person's saying. That would be me assuming that I know what fear is, and diving in and being able to, and then saying, you know, or this is how you overcome fear, or this is what to do with it. Now, no, obviously none of us do that, and that we all get the answer from the person and so on. But I've learned to watch out for my invisible thinking and get curious. What do they mean by that? They say that they're frightened. What does that mean to them? What is frightened to them? As if it was a international word that I didn't know the meaning of. What does it mean? How does it feel? What is it for them? And often in their answer, you might have to dig a little. They will be coming up with the answers that they need for the question in the first place. So I don't have to think about my assumptions. I just have to realize that I have them. Be aware of them. You know, when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, and a lot of the talk came about the white privilege and checking your white privilege. That was an example of, for me, that I walked around with a set of assumptions that other people didn't have. So one of the guys who works with Beyond Recovery, Derek, is a Black guy, and I noticed, because this had, you know, opened my mind to my sort of invisible thinking, if you like. I noticed that when we went into a place, if he went in front of me, a few feet in front of me, he would get checked. He would get checked by the bouncer. He would get asked what he was doing there, and that sort of thing. And then I would walk in and I wouldn't get checked. And that happened so many times that I came to see, oh, that's what he's talking about. When he's talking about the judgment against him and the sort of the prejudice, the discrimination, that's what he's talking about. And it's real and alive for him, that it wasn't real and alive in my mind because I don't have that experience. And that's a extreme example. We assume the people in our circle are having very similar experiences, and they're absolutely not. Even the people in the same house are having their own individual experience of their life, of the situation. And remembering that, for me, is massively helpful in my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my grandchildren, and my son and my daughter-in-law, because I'm realizing, oh, they're having a different experience of this one thing. I hope that was helpful. Thank you. You're all so nice. I'm used to a much more rowdy crowd, you see. Don't start throwing things at me. I'll leave you with this. There is not one person that can't achieve, that can't be the light in the world, that can't do what they want, what they need to do. We all have fear and perceived limitation and stuff. And it always looks like somebody else, it's okay for them, or they're inspiring, or they're this. And you might look at me and you might think that I'm an inspiring person and that you couldn't be. But what I know is that if I'm an inspiring person, it's because you're feeling that within you. That's alive within you. If you have any positive thoughts towards me, positive love, or you know, some feeling towards me that you think, wow, that's amazing, that spark is coming from you. It just looks like me because your eyeballs are pointing out that way and I'm speaking. But I'm speaking to the spark inside you. And if that's coming alive, I would invite you to honor that. I never thought I could write, and I've published a book. I never thought I could speak on the stage, and I've spoken on the stage around the world. I never thought that I never imagined I'd want to work in prison, and I've worked in prisons. There's so many things that I could say I never thought I could. I had a terrible start in life. A start that did give me lots of disadvantages. And it isn't because I'm special or I'm brave or I'm different or blessed. I am blessed, but it isn't because of you know, I have some magic power that you don't have. It's just because I have been fortunate to ignore my head. My head tells me how crap I am. My head tells me how strange I am, how different I am. My head tells me that nobody wants to hear about me. My head tells me that I shouldn't even bother trying to do that. My head still tells me that. But I know that that's not true. And even in my most fearful moments, which I still have, where it seems like I should shrink up, I know the only way to slay that beast is to follow what's coming from inside me. And if I've been guided to write or speak or play or, you know, run or whatever, then that's what I'm meant to do. And so I've learned to ignore that chatter. It still happens. Sometimes less, but it still happens, and it can still be paralyzing. But it's irrelevant. It's junk. It's like in space when it's just junk flying around, and there's just junk flying around in my head, and then occasionally the moon's there or Jupiter's there or some other planet is there and shines for a minute, and then some more junk flies around. And I've learned to honor the quiet. I don't do it as much as I feel like I should or could, but I learned to honor the quiet. And my invitation to you would be to find your quiet, whatever that looks like for you, which is different for everybody, and honor whatever comes up. Be tempted by wisdom, because she wants to tempt you to shine your light in the world. The end.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Thank you for coming in here to share your stories with everyone in the Danish community. And I'm just letting you all know that this is the very, very last chance if you have a question or anything for Jacqueline. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if it's so much as a question, but I was just thinking that I'm educating myself as a practitioner with Jacob and Teresa, and in this, when you feel this urge to share, and I certainly heard, suddenly I heard my ego going, "Who are you to do that? Who are you? You're just a teacher. You don't have the credit. You can't do that. You're not a psychologist. You're not a therapist." And all this ego going on and on, this chattering about how I am not allowed to do this because I am nobody. And then certainly I had this like an insight that Sydney Banks, he was nobody. It was Mr. Nobody who told us something. And now all of a sudden you need to be somebody to say something. And it was really funny. And I was thinking, oh my God, it's amazing. I am allowed to do whatever I want, whatever I feel. I'm not causing any harm, and I can do what I want because there is nothing that there is nothing
Nothing at stake.
Yeah, there's nothing at stake for me because I know I'm okay. So whatever people may think of me, it's their reality, not mine.
Yeah.
And it's just such a blessing. It's just such a blessing. And it has been inspiring listening to you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
Jacqueline, do you want to let people know where they can find you if they want to listen to you some more?
So easiest is www.jbhollows.co.uk. Shall I put that in the chat?
Yeah, go ahead.
You can connect with me on there. You can join the mailing list. You can get the book. Do what you like, but you can find me. And I would love to hear from you. So please do. Thank you so much, Dorothy. That was amazing hosting. Thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone for being here and your lovely faces, the ones that I could see. And yeah. Oh. Things happen on here that I have nothing to do with. But it's been, I can do this though. Look, there we go. It's been so amazing and I appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Renee.